Welcome to Functional Fourth Trimester, a podcast created to support new parents as they return to daily life after having a baby.
Each episode will talk through common postpartum challenges, share practical education and strategies, and hear from real parents and healthcare professionals along the way.
Whether you're listening during a feeding, a walk, or a quiet moment, this space is for you. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Melissa, and we're excited to jump right into today's topic.
A C-section is often labeled as the easy way out, but the reality of recovery is anything but easy. No one really prepares you for the physical pain, emotional ups and downs, and unexpected challenges that come with healing after a C-section. Today, we're talking all about what healing after a C-section truly looks like.
I'm happy to introduce our guest for today's episode, Kristy. She's an occupational therapist and she's joining us all the way from Australia. She is the founder of OT in Motherhood, a new business that's dedicated to supporting women through the full spectrum of motherhood. She also hosts a podcast called C-Section Support. Kristy believes that a well-prepared mother is a more confident mother and that women who give birth via C-section deserve far more support than they typically receive. Welcome, Kristy.
Thank you. Hello.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us today. We are glad you are here. I would love to kind of just start off with, if you want to walk us through like what your experience was like, was it expected, kind of just what that whole process was like for your personal experience.
Yeah, sure. So I've had 3 C-sections now. So my youngest child, he's almost 1. So first one was 7 years ago. When I was pregnant with my first daughter, I was actually referred to the maternal fetal medicine team at one of the hospitals here, and I found out at 15 weeks pregnant that I would need a C-section and that all of my children would need to be born by C-section. And that was hard to process for a little while. I was definitely disappointed that I wouldn't get a chance at having a vaginal birth, that sort of decision. At the same time, I was grateful that it was obviously the best for my health and for my baby's health. So it was good in a way to having that knowledge so early on in my pregnancy. It meant that I could have so much support set up. Like my husband, we were very fortunate. My husband had at least 6 weeks off work for each of the births of our children. And it also meant that I could educate myself a little bit. Like I read the hospital booklets in advance about post-surgical precautions, what was involved. We went to an education session at the hospital. So we felt prepared as we possibly could be, but at the same time, afterwards, I was like, oh, wow, there's so much that I didn't know. And I think to an extent, you can't fully prepare yourself for such like a major surgery. I'd worked in a hospital at the time, so I felt comfortable with how hospitals work and what might happen after surgery in terms of the care. I regularly saw patients after surgery. But when it's yourself, and obviously it's not just surgery, you've got a new baby, you're learning to breastfeed, you've got all the hormones, you're figuring out baby sleep and everything. It was quite overwhelming in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that that would be the case. I'm curious, like what in particular was the most unexpected kind of thing that you ran into?
Yeah, so for my first daughter, my mobility was affected, which I expected, but it was affected more than I thought. Like I actually had trouble with my transfers. So getting up and down from the couch, I could do it, but I needed 2 hands to help me. So there's no way I could do that while also holding my baby. I also couldn't lean over and put her in the bassinet at home. At hospital, it was fine because it was higher up. So I was managing that okay. But at home, we had a co-sleeper bassinet and I couldn't manage that. And also getting in and out of bed, even though I knew how to do it the best way possible, it was still hard and I basically avoided it as much as possible. And then even just walking around the house, I was sort of a little bit hunched, like very slowly walking. So it kind of shocked me from that perspective. And that I also had back pain to begin with, just for the first few days, which in hindsight makes sense. Like your whole center of gravity changes once your baby is born, and your ab muscles are obviously affected after surgery. But yeah, it was just unexpected. But actually, for my second baby, I was more mobile, which was
Okay.
interesting. Um, I'm not 100% sure why. I think part of it was, I think my recovery was partly better because even though my husband was around to help my older daughter at that time, I still was moving around and walking around the house quite a lot. I still had lots of time to rest in between, but I definitely maintained that mobility, which I think helped. And in terms of my first daughter, when my mobility was sort of affected, I had a lot of trouble breastfeeding. So I was expressing, and then we were finger feeding or SNS feeding to begin with, which actually helped in a way because it meant I could express, then my husband could be the one to get up and down with my daughter.
Hmm.
And I didn't have to do that, or he could, hand me her to feed with the bottle or the finger feeding. Yeah. So we kind of managed that okay. Yeah.
So could you explain what you mean by finger feeding?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I was expressing, and then we put the milk in a bottle, and then there was a little tube that we had going from in the bottle,
Okay.
and then we'd put it like next to our finger, and then my daughter would suck on my finger with the tube
Okay.
next to it. So it's instead of
Okay.
introducing a bottle, yeah. And then when she was a bit older, we did use a bottle, but we also transitioned back to breastfeeding. So
Okay.
yeah,
Makes sense.
yeah. Mm.
That's cool. I haven't actually heard of that, so that's super interesting. I
Yeah.
like hearing that. I'm curious, I'm curious in what ways, like having a C-section, do you feel like it impacted like your postpartum experience?
Part of it was just even like emotionally after I had my daughter. It was right on summer. And not many of my friends had babies yet. And, the guidelines are you shouldn't go swimming for 6 weeks, or, in a bath or anything either. And that, I mean, not that I was in a state that I was going to be going to the beach or anything, but I think that did affect me in a little way. We didn't socialize as much during that initial period. Although, to be honest, part of that was just postpartum in general. Like I said, I had difficulties breastfeeding, and I actually was in hospital again when my daughter was 4 weeks old, um, because I had mastitis, so not C-section related, but yeah, so that was quite, yeah, I guess a longer transition back to like normal life than what I expected.
So I know in the beginning you talked about processing the fact that you were going to have a C-section.
Yeah.
And I think that there's probably, like we can envision our birth and what we want it to look
Mm.
like. And we can come up with these plans, and things like this will come into play. And obviously, you knew in advance, so you could process this
Mm.
ahead of time. Other moms, they might not know until they get to the hospital, right? So,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
are there things that you did during that period of time that helped you accept and process this change and go from what you were envisioning to now
Mm.
what it would be like?
Yeah. I think a lot of it was education and just being informed of the process and what recovery would look like as much as possible. Obviously, when people have an emergency C-section, um, they can't do that to the same extent, but I think it's still important. Anyone can have a C-section, right? You can plan as much as you want. You can plan for a home birth and everything, and it can still be necessary. So I think it is important that women do know like what will happen, what to expect actually at the hospital if that's required, and also what will happen afterwards in terms of like those post-surgical precautions, what they can and can't do for a while afterwards, and have a plan A, but then have a plan B and a plan C for what support they can access in advance, and having that support, like knowing, like if they're going to have a doula, like who are they? Have they met them already? Do they have their contact details? Because after you have your baby, I was in like no state to be, thinking about things, planning things, researching things. And part of the thing is there isn't a whole lot of information out there about
Mhm.
how to recover afterwards. Now I know so many women who have had C-sections, and some of them were planned, some of them weren't planned. And so many of them didn't get any information after their birth about how to recover. Maybe some of them were given a handout they may or may not have read. Some of them weren't given any written information, and they just go home with those precautions that are like, don't do this, 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 and this. But then they get home and then they're like, wait a minute, I can't do this, but so, I can't lift anything heavier than my baby, for example. That's a common one. But can I carry my baby and my water bottle, for example? Or like, can I bend and pick up something from the floor? Like, there's such a wide variance of yeah, what you can and can't do. It's not so black and white. And I think there
Mhm.
can be a lot of uncertainty for women because obviously they want to participate in their normal life, especially when they have older kids. There's more demands on them. And then there can be that risk of people doing either one side where they're not really doing anything and they're lying in bed and they're resting a lot and they're not getting that mobility, or they're doing everything and they're like picking up the kid and like, oh, I did that. I was fine. Um, yeah, and we don't want that either. Like
Mhm.
there's an comfortable in the middle, which will vary on the
Mhm.
person to basically, yeah.
Yeah. And even too, like the logistics about like how to take care of your wound and your scar now and like
Exactly.
all of those just
Yeah.
like logistical things that I feel like
Yes.
you shouldn't have to be trying to figure out when you're sleep deprived trying to care for your newborn. Like you
Yeah,
should have a very clear idea of how to care for yourself for recovery.
exactly. Yeah. And scar massage is important, but I wasn't told to massage my scar after my daughter. I think
I was going to
maybe,
ask you that if that
yeah.
was something they actually taught you or not, because I don't think
No.
it's common to teach, but it is important.
Yes. I think maybe after my second or third, I was told, yes, you should massage my scar, but as in terms of like how and when and um, what that looks like, because for a lot of women, it can feel really icky. Like,
Mhm.
there's reduced sensation around your skin. I had this part of my skin, like the size of a coin, like maybe about 5 centimeters above the actual scar that I couldn't feel. And that happened for a couple of months. And I knew why and I knew what to do, but that can be just really like a bit scary, I guess, for some women
Mhm.
who's like, why is that happening? Like, what do I do about it? Is that just going to be like that forever now? Um, it's like any wound you've got anywhere in your body. If you have a cut through it, they're cutting through nerves as well. So that does take time to repair. And you can get sort of altered sensations. So it's not necessarily fully numb. It can feel like a bit, I don't know, icky is the best word that I don't know how to describe it. It just feels a bit weird. Um, and as those nerves regrow and repair, then that sensation can go back to normal. But what can help is like desensitizing those areas. So touching those areas, tapping, you can use like cotton wool, things like that, and but gradually, I guess, training those nerves back to what they should be so that they can feel normal again. But it can take months sometimes for that sort of full feeling to come back. Yeah.
I know we've talked like you talked a little bit about mobility being a challenge. Was there
Mm,
anything that was like particularly challenging during, either one of your recoveries?
yeah. So like I mentioned, I had heaps of support from my husband. He wasn't working. So he basically took over like the laundry and the cooking. Um, as I got better, especially the second and third time when I already had kids at home, I would start by doing things like packing the lunch boxes. So things that wouldn't take too long. They didn't have to bend much. I wasn't picking up heavy pans from in the cupboard and reaching up, that sort of thing. And then like with laundry, I would be putting the clothes away, but I wouldn't be carrying the heavy laundry basket. So I'd gradually sort of go back into those normal tasks that I used to do. The other thing I was going to say is looking after my kids as well, because I obviously knew each time. So the second and third time, we knew in advance. So like, um, I instead of sort of picking up my child leading up to the birth, I would start. getting them used to like getting cuddles on the couch, or instead of lifting them up onto the change table, I would use pull-up nappies, for example, or we taught my son how to climb into the car seat himself. Like we're in a we have a four-wheel drive, so it is quite high. So he was able to do that. So we were sort of able to adapt how our kids did things and
Mhm.
how we did those parenting tasks, so that it was going to be easier on me.
It sounds like you guys did a really great job with thinking ahead. And I feel like those
Yeah.
are great things that a mom, if she knows that this is going to happen, or maybe she just had a C-section,
Mhm.
she can't do the planning ahead with the kids like you did, where you're transitioning,
Yes.
lifting them, so it doesn't go all of a sudden you bring a brand new baby home and you're like, I can't pick you up, I can't pick you up, and it just
Yeah.
feels like a lot to them. They're used to
Yeah.
like, let's cuddle here, you crawl up here by yourself, or like here's how, like you've already
Mm.
brought on that transition in advance, and I think that's so valuable. And
Mm.
even if you're not having a C-section, like moms that had a vaginal birth, they still need to be, mindful of their bodies and take care of themselves. So I feel like
Yeah.
that's something that any family could take into preparing for baby two, baby three, whatever it might be, to
Yeah.
help their other children transition in a way that they don't really know that that's what you're
Yeah,
doing, but you're
exactly.
preparing for them for the future.
Yeah, and I think just education in general, postpartum, in terms of the woman's function, there's so much emphasis on the baby, as it should be, as at the same time. But I do think mums tend to, um, yeah, neglect themselves sometimes, but also that information is often not readily available in terms of how to best look after themselves and to heal the best possible as
Mhm.
well. Yeah.
That was one of the things that I feel like we had in mind with like creating this whole podcast is it's like we
Mm.
want like yes, the baby is such an important part obviously, but we don't want new moms to neglect their own healing and even
Yeah.
just like how their healing is going to impact, things later down the road. It's going to impact their
Mhm.
ability to care for their child. So like it's all intertwined.
Earlier you were talking about that educating yourself was what you found to be the most helpful. You mentioned
Mhm.
getting to know the hospital and kind of what it looks like in terms of C-section there. So if there were moms listening to this that
Mhm.
are, how do like where do I start with educating myself?
Yeah.
Yes, they can learn about the hospital and what it looks like, but are there other resources that you feel like are very valuable?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing is start with the hospital. Like looking online, they might have some written education about C-section birth and recovery. I know my hospital does. So quick Google search should be able to hopefully find that. Have a read of that. 'Cause obviously the process for every hospital is slightly different. But just also being aware when they're looking online, who they're getting that information from, because there's a lot of, I guess, some like influencers who might be like, okay, this is the process for me, this is what happened, and that's fine. That can be helpful, but it's not necessarily going to be the same. Each hospital will have different procedures, um, and that's also that information is not necessarily going to be accurate. Obviously, we want evidence-based information, especially when it comes to recovery and what you can and can't do. So there are definitely some sources better than others.
And I would love to hear like a little bit more about your business and like what kind of things you're doing. I know you have the
Yeah.
the podcast and you just do episodes about C-section specifically? Is that also what your
Mm.
business is centered around?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm at the very start of setting
Mhm.
up. I mean, I did start my podcast a while ago and then it went on pause unplanned for a few reasons. But I am planning to start that up again in the next week or so. And then I'm also planning some digital products, basically information that people can access about C-section. So the preparation and the recovery. I don't have a website yet. It is in process, but I've sent you my Instagram
Mhm.
so people can come follow me there, and then I'll update that as I go along. one thing I'll tell you that I didn't know is, they say rest after surgery, which makes sense. After my daughter, I thought I was resting a lot. Like I spent a lot of time on the couch feeding and then like, being nap trapped with her sleeping on me. And then it wasn't until I think my second that I realized that with rest, really you should be horizontal rest. So lying down in bed at least once a day for at least an hour or so is actually what you really need to be doing. Um, Obviously, rest and not overdoing it from a physical point of view as well, but lying down is actually best for your pelvic floor and for healing. And so something so simple, I just didn't know for my first. So yeah, for my second and third, I was able to sort of put that into my daily routine, make sure I lay down for a while each day. Yeah.
I love
Mm.
that. I feel like I would think similar, like, oh, I'm sitting on the couch, I'm
Yeah.
resting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, you make a good point about like really to get kind of the tension, the relief, like the tension
Mhm.
off of your pelvic floor. Horizontal
Exactly.
is going to do that more than if you're sitting up and still
Yeah.
just like sitting on everything and kind of
Yeah.
crunched over. I feel like typically when I'm on the couch, I'm like kind of hunched over, and so you're probably like squishing your
Exactly.
core and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And even from a scar perspective, lengthening out that wound so that it's not healing like all, yeah, scrunched up, as you say.
Mhm.
You want it to lengthen so that you do have that mobility through that scar tissue and that movement. Yeah, going forward.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I love too, it seems like a big kind of theme of a lot of what we've been talking about in terms of postpartum and recovering from a C-section is like in the OT world, what we could talk about like energy conservation. And so
Yeah.
just like finding a way to do things that aren't gonna increase your pain, that aren't gonna fatigue you to the
Yes.
point where you can't do the rest of your tasks throughout the day. I think
Yeah.
you bring up a good point, especially when you've got other kids running around the house and
Hmm.
you're like, you still have to last all day long with these kids,
Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
finding ways to do things that are not gonna, flare up your pain and just drain all your energy,
Yeah.
and still keeping like the precautions and the safety. I think that's great.
Yeah. And that can be hard, like even with that knowledge of, conserving your energy and how to do that, it can be hard mentally. Like as I've started feeling better, I was used to, especially the second and third, used to being a mom, busy, doing all the things. And so I'd kind of want to get back to doing that and do things fast. And often it was my husband being like, you need to slow down, or like, no, I'm going to do that. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. But I'd still like, no, that no, actually, you're right. I need to slow down and just take things easy because the last thing you want to do is yeah, compromise that healing and be worse off for it. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
I
As
feel
someone who
like,
also runs at 100 miles an hour, I feel like I would struggle
Yeah.
with that too. I'd be like, I just want to get back to my daily life,
Yeah.
especially too
Yeah.
like you said, swimming. Like if there's things you can't do that you really enjoy and really like,
Mm,
which getting back to those could help with like mental health concerns and all those kind of
exactly.
things. So you're
Yeah.
almost like limited and away from that as well.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, getting that balance, that leisure time back in those activities. Yeah, you might have to adapt how you do things for a while.
I feel like you've provided a lot of great value throughout, like even from helping your children kind of prepare for you
Mm,
having a C-section when to learning about the hospital, to sharing, kind of things that you learned that you needed to do. So I'm kind of wondering if there's anything else that you would think this is what I would tell a mom if she knew she was having a C-section, and this is what I
mm,
would tell a mom if she just had one and she's now back home. What would be your biggest
yeah.
piece of advice?
Yeah. I think from an emotional point of view, knowing that whatever you feel is valid, especially those women who ended up with emergency C-section and potentially a bit blindsided, happy that their baby's safe, but they're allowed to feel grief about not getting the vaginal birth, or disappointed. You can, some people be like, oh, at least the baby's here safe. Like, yeah, but it's not just that. Like, your mental health matters and your feelings matter. Um, so that's okay to feel those things. And if it can be a really good idea to talk to someone about those feelings as well, even months down the track or whenever, whenever that comes up for you. But also, I guess from a physical point of view, recovery starts from day one, really, and rehab. You don't need to wait. It's not like do nothing and then it's 6 weeks and then do everything. There's things that you can do from day one to help with that recovery, and you just gradually build from there.
I think that's so awesome and such a good point. It's like you don't have to just wait till 6 weeks. Like, great, you're
Yeah,
cleared to exercise, go for it. And you're like still having
yeah,
all this pain potentially, and maybe your mobility is still decreased. So I think it's so
yeah,
important. And too, like I know we talk a lot about like the earlier you can kind of start healing and recovery, the better it will be down the road. Like if you wait weeks and weeks and weeks, it might take even longer then to kind of get back to what you feel like is your normal kind of
yeah.
baseline.
Yeah, and there is that balance. Obviously, you want to get that mobility back, but you don't want to overdo it. And in saying that, like, there's guidelines for healing and what you can and can't do at certain timeframes, but that's obviously going to be slightly different for each individual person. I mean, I've had three C-sections, and each was the actual experience itself was slightly different, and then the recovery was different. I still had the same amount of support, still the same house, with the same furniture and same setup and everything, but my experience was different. So don't compare your experience directly to your friend or someone else and think like, oh, like I'm not healing as quickly or so much better than how they're doing or whatever. Like you're on your own journey. I think that's really important to be aware of. That yeah, you'll get there. It takes time.
I love how you said you're on your own journey. And I think that's really
Mm,
important for us to remember in the whole motherhood journey. We all
yeah,
process things differently. We all recover differently. Our bodies are different.
yeah,
Our babies are different. And so
hmm
comparison can become a really big challenge. So really focusing on your journey and what you need to
yeah,
do and working with whoever you're working with, your healthcare professionals, whoever it is, to just focus on you and not compare. I think that's so
yeah,
important. So I love that you said that.
yeah.
I wanted to thank our guest speaker, Kristy, for joining us today, all the way from Australia, to talk about her experience with C section recovery. In the description to this episode, I will put the link to our blog post, which will have Kristy's information and her company's, as well as some other additional resources for any parents who are looking to get more information on this topic. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and we can't wait to talk with you again next time.
I hope today's conversation gave you something practical to take into your day or simply remind you that what you're experiencing is normal. Returning to daily life after birth is a process and support matters.
However your day continues from here, be gentle with yourself. You're doing important work. Thanks for listening. We'll meet you back here next time.